Hi everybody, happy Monday. And I have these glasses on because they were used at my son's birthday party, and it'll make the thumbnail the kind of thing that people will want to click on. Maybe you even clicked on it because you wanted to see why I was wearing those glasses. Anything for review, right? So today we have a small assignment that you should deliver to me through kbaker@ecusd7.org. There are new guidelines in place for grading from the state of Illinois starting tomorrow. So I'm assigning the first one today, which means that it can only be graded if it helps your grade. So no matter what you submit, it can only help your grade. Your grade can only go up from what it was before we left. I don't know what the guidelines are for tomorrow. We'll find out tomorrow, perhaps. So in today's episode, we are going to finish, period 3. And that means we have to put a nation together. Our United States, of course, was crafted not out of the wilderness in that moment. America had some experience with self-government before salutary neglect. And America, of course, was in the process of having their own government during the Revolution. We had decades of experience in attempting to govern ourselves in a variety of ways. As you know from your civic classes, we settled on both the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. We ended up with a bicameral legislature. So when Hamilton, once we realized the Articles of Confederation were a disaster because they had no power to tax, therefore we could not enforce law, we needed a tax structure. And so Hamilton suggested funding and assumption, which is largely the entire point of Hamilton, despite the musical. Hamilton's other efforts are merely drama. Saying this to my wife, who's sitting here offended because she, like maybe you, sat here and sang the whole thing when it was live the other day. Hamilton suggested that we tax the people and that we create tariffs and we use the money to build internal improvements. And it worked. It worked. It's the system we use today. Thank you, Henry Clay, and your American system. So we also see Hamilton creating something called the Report on Public Manufactures. He suggests that we have to support our industry because we are becoming, I think Hamilton understood, we are the new mercantilist in the world. We had the resources to build our own finished goods and sell them domestically and around the world. So we needed markets. And to have markets, you have to have a couple things. First of all, you have to have the ability to achieve credit. You have to be credit worthy. You need to have connections with other people. And you have to avoid the kinds of conflicts that are going to ruin your economy, like we saw with England after the French and Indian War. And it was, of course, the mercantile interests in England that lobbied the Crown to end the Revolutionary War, because they couldn't afford to have an ongoing conflict hurting their sales like that. First of all, they were denied almost the entirety of the New World markets. So the Americans knew they didn't want to create the kind of conflicts that were going to limit mercantilism. And so Washington declares us neutral. It's one of the great things Washington did. Of course, in his farewell address, he said, don't engage in don't create political parties, don't get involved in European politics, and keep your golf clubs clean. No, he didn't say that. He said that you should not have a president for more than 2 years. So we create the Northwest Ordinance, which is going to create a mechanism for the addition of new states into the United States. We are well positioned for growth, and I see the Northwest Ordinance as the opposite of the Proclamation Line of 1763. The Northwest Ordinance plans for movement west. It plans for growth. Now, of course, underlying all this is land tension with Native Americans. There is someone on the land. And there is going to be an ongoing process of tension between the Americans, we'll not stop calling them British colonists now, between the Americans and the people who already live there. We also see the Pinckney Treaty, established in 1793, that basically says that our western boundary is going to be the Mississippi River. America is born with space to move into, and I could finish every sentence by simply saying, although someone else lives there. I think we know that is the context for everything else I'm going to say. This period of putting the nation together after the war is often known as the era of good feelings. It's often known as the critical period. We see that our northern border is established by the Rush-Bagot Treaty. The Adams-Onis Treaty is going to give us our boundary to the south. Initially, we're going to get Florida, and Spain is going to abandon their claim to Oregon through that treaty. That will largely be unsettled moving forward. Spain doesn't get what they want, and they continue to claim Florida. We see that we promptly ignore Washington's advice, and Hamilton and Jefferson, of course, create political parties. This is not that weird. I mean, birds of a feather do, in fact, flock together. We see that Federalists gravitate toward Adams, and Anti-Federalists gravitate toward Jefferson. And that distinction between Federalists and Anti-Federalists is going to haunt us all the way up until the Civil War. The challenge is going to be creating some form of agreement in the middle, although Adams and Jefferson aren't really that great with compromise. We know that Adams created the Alien Sedition Act, which basically said that the president can put anybody in jail for saying something he didn't like, or he can imprison or expel foreigners from the nation. And, of course, this made everyone who was an anti-federalist quite concerned, because it expanded the power of the executive branch, and it's pretty federalist. It's a new power for the government. And so we see the writing of the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Jefferson and Madison are going to write the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, respectively, which basically says that the power of the states should not be abridged by the federal government. And this, for those of you who have your notes at home, I heartily suggest you look at the Alien and Sedition Acts and their counterparts in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions again. At some point, there's going to be a short essay question, a long essay question, in which you use those as evidence for a question involving federalism. If you can then look at, what was his name? Barnwell Rhett as well, if you have access to his words, then he's the one who basically, after the Tariff of 1828, echoed John C. Calhoun's concerns about federalism and anti-federalism. So Adams does not gain re-election, largely because of his unpopularity due to the Alien Sedition Act. And we see then a new challenge when Jefferson takes office and tells Madison not to deliver those warrants for new judges, precipitating a challenge for William Marbury. Marbury v. Madison is going to go to the Supreme Court, and the court is not going to actually rule on the merits of the case itself. Instead, they say that the Judiciary Act, which created the rules under which those warrants were signed, was not a good piece of legislation. They basically invalidated the Judiciary Act. And that, of course, is a new power for the federal government. It's the first time the Supreme Court had claimed the power to declare a law unconstitutional. I'm going to just reiterate that over time, we see every executive branch of every year attempting to expand the power of the president. Expanding the power of the president is not that weird. Every president has tried to. Nowadays, of course, we see that our current president attempts to, and it was the same for the previous president. Obama did that, and every president before those two did that. They all do that. That's what executives in power do. They attempt to consolidate and gain power. So one of the challenges we have in this era of good feelings or critical phase is most of our political issues revolve around federalism. Economically, we have a lot of challenges because we have debts to pay. And we're moving up to the time where we're going to see, in fact, tomorrow, we're going to take a look at the Panic of 1898, which, is a challenge for us because, I think you're well prepared to understand, there are challenges when the federal government both regulates and fails to regulate the either manufacturing or economic opportunities. In the Panic of 1819, we're going to see that land was the cause. Land was speculated on, and then it didn't go well. So we're going to save that for tomorrow. So there is an assignment today. All I need is a paragraph, and it's a challenge to do it in just a paragraph. I understand that, but there's some things I'm certain you're going to have to write about now that the fourth quarter DBQ isn't happening. I'd like to hit some of the high points of the past before I finish this review and we get back, because we will get back to the civil rights movement and then move forward with the end of the semester. But for everybody who's listening, which is all of my students, give me a quick paragraph answering this question. And now, just so you know, every question is a trap. There's no answer. To what degree is the federal government an agency of human welfare? And welfare does not mean giving free things to people. Welfare means making people's lives better. To what degree is the government an agency of human welfare? I think you're well prepared to do this. I look forward to the answer in your emails to kbaker@ecusd7.org. Have a nice night.